Balls Deep.
Welcome to Balls Deep, a humorous yet informative medical show with a mission of optimizing your performance in the bedroom, the bathroom, and the boardroom. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Pazona, a board-certified urologist and CEO of Pazona MD. We hope you enjoy. Now, let's jump right in. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Balls Deep. I am Dr. Joe Pazona, your host, board-certified urologist. And as always, I am joined by Kat Williams.
Hi.
Hey, Kat, how are you today?
Well, I'm good. I'm wearing your favorite sandals.
Oh, God. Yeah.
I don't know if you can see these on YouTube. They're amazing. They're super cute and chic. All women stop to compliment me on these sandals. And Dr. Pazona over here thinks they are the worst things he's ever seen, which is why I continue to wear them. This has nothing to do with urology.
Listen,
okay.
let's be honest. Most men don't look at women's shoes, but they're pretty bad.
Maybe
so.
you guys should.
Listen, as long as you love them, that's all that matters. So.
Okay. Overactive bladder?
Yeah, let's do it.
I think we should talk about this.
Yeah, definitely. The men and women suffer from overactive
Yes.
bladder. It's a very common issue. I think 40 million people in the U.S. have an overactive bladder, so I imagine
I may be one of them.
Absolutely. Well,
Unclear.
Why don't we just jump right into the meat of the show for a urology pun segment we like to call
Balls Deep.
Okay, so overactive bladder. Give us an overview. Give us a definition. What does it mean? I hear about this. People talk about it. I mean, I can get a common sense idea of what this means, but give us some medical information.
Okay. So an overactive bladder is a constellation of symptoms, which can include urinary frequency. And we define urinary frequency in the urology world as urinating more than every 2 hours. Number two would be something called urinary urgency. That's when I gotta go, I gotta go.
And you can't hold it.
Not always.
Okay.
Now, you can have urinary urgency by itself, or you can have it with incontinence, in which case it is now called urge incontinence. That means the signal was so strong, you just couldn't get to the bathroom in time. And the final component is waking up too much at night to go to the bathroom, fancy doctor term for nocturia. So daytime frequency, urgency with or without leakage, and waking up at night to go to the bathroom. Together, those are the components of an overactive bladder.
Okay, so personal story. I feel like I have to TT a lot during the day. Okay, side note, TT is the nice Southern lady term for going to the bathroom. And we need to use that. I know you guys like to say the word pee. I don't love it. It's not elegant. We're going to talk about TT today.
So can I share something too?
No, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for those who don't know, I'm a New Yorker through and through. I lost the accent many years ago because when I was in college, people were like, why are you always so angry? And I'm like,
I'm Italian.
I'm not angry. I'm Italian, So, when I come to the South and hear that it's TT, I can't help but laugh a little bit extra because if for anyone who's sat around an Italian dinner table, and your uncle goes, all right, I got to go take a leak.
No, come on. You're killing me. You're killing me.
What are you doing over there? You taking a piss?
Okay. No, absolutely not. TT. All right, I'm going to bring this back. So here's the thing. I think that I TT many times a day.
Mm-hmm.
Many times a day. I do.
You do.
I do drink a lot of water. I drink a cup of tea in the morning. How do you know what's normal and what's too much and what's actually part of a problem of overactive bladder? Where's the line?
So one of my tenets of urology that I try and teach all of our team members as they come on board and educate our patients, fluid in usually equals fluid out. Now, let's back up and kind of better understand what that means and why I didn't say always. So when we drink fluid, it's going to go through our intestinal tract. We're going to absorb that water. And then based on hormonal signals from other parts of our body, our fluid volume in our body, our blood volume, our blood pressure, our heart rate. There's all these complex signaling pathways that go on. And they basically tell the kidney, hey, we're dehydrated or we're sweating a lot because it's 100 out and I'm working outside. Let's hold on to that fluid. In which case, there's been reports of people drinking a gallon of fluid and not going to the bathroom at all because they are that dehydrated, or they're losing fluid from sweating. If you're like most of us who are relatively well hydrated, once your body gets adequate fluid, it goes, hey, we don't need this extra fluid. Let's get rid of it. So it's going to send the signal to the kidneys to turn that extra fluid into urine. That urine is going to pass down the two tubes called the ureters from the kidney that go to the bladder. And then the bladder is going to do its primary function, which is to store or hold urine. So if we are drinking a lot of fluid and you drink and you urinate a lot, the bladder's not overactive. It's doing what we're asking it to do, which is get rid of all the extra TT that's in there.
So that's pretty normal. You drink a lot, you might TT a lot.
Absolutely. Now,
Okay.
where does it cross over to abnormal? Well, that's where it can get a little bit tricky. So one thing that we do is we want to think about what is the normal size of a bladder. So a bladder that's not overactive can hold about 10 to 12 ounces of fluid. It's like, a soda can. For those in the metric system, 300 to maybe at most 400 milliliters of fluid. And once a bladder distends to that much, there are receptors that send a signal to the brain and go, we got to go empty this out. This is uncomfortable. And, kind of makes sense, right? If you don't urinate, what can happen? You can develop a urinary tract infection. You can damage your bladder muscle. Or in very rare cases, the urine will actually back up to the kidneys and can lead to kidney failure. Now, that's exceedingly rare. So for all those people like, oh my God, I hold my bladder too long, like I'm going to have kidney failure. Very, very unlikely. But it's something that is evolutionary in place as sort of a safety mechanism. And so when you get to that normal capacity, you're going to want to empty it out. Now, there are some people who develop what's called a lazy bladder, one in which they do that for years and years and years, and the bladder stretches out. The biggest culprits are teachers. So often I'll evaluate a woman in our clinic in her 60s or 70s, and I find out she's not emptying her bladder well, and I go, were you a teacher by chance? And about half the time I'm right with that. And she goes, how'd you know that? It just,
because teachers held their bladder
exactly.
for
the whole,
so long
the whole
through
school
the
day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
Okay.
nurses are another
And nurses.
population. Absolutely. So on the flip side, if your bladder's overactive, you might hold half that amount. So one of the ways we can tell if your bladder's overactive versus a volume issue is by how much is coming out. So if you TT and it's just, and you're done, and then an hour later you're back up and it's the same amount, there are one of two things going on. Either you're not emptying your bladder, and as it gets closer to capacity, you're only getting part of it out. Something that's less common in women and more common in men with prostate issues. Or you have an overactive bladder. The bladder just simply cannot hold enough to generate a longer stream. So if you used to hold more and have larger volumes, and now that's shrinking, you may have an overactive bladder.
Okay. Other than drinking too much and then having an over, what can lead to an overactive bladder?
Well, I think one other point that's important to touch upon is
Okay.
it's not a matter of how much you drink, but also what you drink.
Also, what? Uh-oh.
So going back to some previous episodes here, we talked about how the bladder does not like sugar, acid, caffeine, and booze. So all
Good Lord, what's left?
all right, all the fun stuff. It doesn't like cigarettes either.
Oh, geez.
So if you drink those things, you may find you urinate more frequently than if you drank the same amount of fluid. And that's for everyone out there who's had their morning cup of coffee or two or a cup of tea. And they're like, man, I pee all morning. But then usually by later in the day, I'm pretty good. That's almost always that morning caffeine jolt that we're looking for.
So the caffeine in our coffee and our tea in the morning has irritated our bladders, and that's caused us to go more.
So the caffeine, technically speaking, the caffeine is what's called a diuretic. Fancy doctor term for it, acts like a water pill. So when your body gets caffeine, it is pushing more fluid out. And that's why when people who drink a lot of coffee or sodas actually get dehydrated, because you're losing water as you're drinking. So you're urinating out the coffee or the soda, and the caffeine's pushing more of it out.
Interesting.
But it's often the fact that I'm not aware of, for the most part, many caffeinated beverages that aren't also loaded with sugar or acid. So that bitterness of coffee, tea, and the bubbles of soda, that's acid. The sugar's obvious.
Okay. What else do we need to know here? What else causes an overactive bladder?
Yeah, so if we're looking again, like, all right, doc, so I looked at what I drank. I limited my fluid. I'm still just not going large amounts, and I'm going all the time. So I think the next tool that people can do, and this is something that we do as part of our urology evaluation, is first do something called a voiding diary or a bladder journal. So, if I ask you, how many times did you TT yesterday, or how much did you drink?
A lot?
Yeah. And so
How many? I don't know.
your lot may be very different than the next guy who comes in and says the same exact
Sure.
thing and doesn't pee at all. Oh, I drink a lot, but I can hold my bladder. So this is a way to get some data. So you could do this at home, or, as part of a good urology evaluation, we'll do this at Pazona MD, is people will come in and we'll go, all right, for 24 hours, I want you to journal on this sheet of paper. And we're going to give them some sort of receptacle to urinate into, whether it be a handheld urinal for a man or like one of those hats that sit in the toilets for women. And every single time you use the restroom, measure the amount of urine that comes out. With a very different container, please measure what you're drinking as well.
Not the same one. Yikes. Okay.
And we get what is affectionately called in healthcare is the I's and O's. What are the ins? What are the outs? How do they measure up? And so that's a way to get some data to really figure out, again, is this a fluid issue, a drinking too much issue, fancy doctor term polydipsia, too much drinking, or is this truly an overactive bladder or some other medical condition? So I know you keep asking me, you want to jump into some other things here, but I think it's important for people to understand some of the tools that we use and some of the things you can do at home to figure out, what is the root cause of this? But again, please don't, guys out there, I can just picture you right now. You're going to take your favorite glass from dinner and urinate in that, and then forget to tell your wife or kids that that's what you use. So please use a medical grade receptacle, or come see us, even better, and we'll take care of you. But so what else can play a role?
What else can play a role?
So there are 4 common health conditions, other things that go on that lead to an overactive bladder that people can start working on today. So the first one is obesity. So we all know this is an epidemic, and if we think about how the bladder senses things, it senses pressure. So whether or not that pressure is because it's distending with urine or you've got a belly sitting on the urine, people who are obese have more overactive bladder issues. So very commonly, one of the things we can recommend to people is, listen, if we can get off some of that weight, some of these symptoms are going to go away. Never mind the fact that obesity is linked to 2 of our next medical issues that play a role in an overactive bladder. The first and most obvious one would be diabetes. So remember, diabetes is at least type 2 diabetes is a too much food going in, not enough energy being burned issue. And what we do is we build up insulin resistance. When insulin can't take the sugar and put it inside of our body's cells or store it anymore, it builds up in the blood. When our blood sugar is too high, one of the ways we get rid of it is by urinating it out. And so we've learned from previous episodes on urinary tract infections and enlarged prostate that diabetes can irritate the bladder. So again, whether the sugar's from a can of Coke or from type 2 diabetes, the bladder doesn't care. It's going to be much more irritable.
It's still sugar.
If it's high sugar.
Okay.
Yep. So we got to get the diabetes under control. The other medical condition that's often linked to obesity, obstructive sleep apnea. We had a great episode on sleep. For those of you who didn't catch that, please subscribe and go back and watch that. But in there, we dive into healthy sleep habits. But the biggest sleep pathology that's out there is snoring or sleep apnea. And that's essentially where the body is not able to get oxygen to all the tissues. And so there's probably two things going on in sleep apnea that relate to urinating too much, especially at night. One is there's some complex hormonal, and I almost said horny there. It's a urology podcast.
I'm gonna leave that one alone.
It's hard not to it's certainly not because of the shoes. It's hard not to leave that one alone. But there's some hormonal as well as cardiopulmonary or lung and heart issues that are going on with fluids that make us urinate more at night when we have sleep apnea. The second is you're just never getting in a deep sleep. And so we all have, slept a good night's sleep, and then you wake up in the morning and you're at the toilet forever because your bladder got a chance to rest, and slowly throughout the evening it stretched out. Well, if you never get into a deep enough sleep, the second any urine goes into the bladder, you're going to be up to go. And they've done some studies showing that patients who have sleep apnea, who get treated with one of those kind of Darth Vader looking CPAP machines, they actually wake up less at night to go to the bathroom. So if your overactive bladder is mainly at nighttime and you snore, we got to treat the sleep apnea. Okay.
What about constipation? Would that fall into the category with the three things you just mentioned?
Yeah, definitely. If we want to call it sort of the four horsemen of common medical conditions that lead to going to the bathroom too much, constipation is a huge one. And this is especially an issue we see in women. Why is that? Well, let's again go back to anatomy. It's so important to understand your body and how we were built. So the pelvis is primarily a bony structure. That's kind of down in the hips. She's got a good pelvis for holding children. Well, there's other things that people have to hold there. So we've got the bladder. Women have their female organs, and then we have the gastrointestinal tract, or the intestines, specifically the rectum, which is where we store poop until we have to go number 2. And so if you're a woman has infrequent bowel movements, then it just is going to start building up in that pelvis, and there's only so much room. So what's the one thing that gets squished? It's the bladder. So the bladder is the one thing that suffers. So we often say in urology, we got to fix the bowels before we can fix the bladder. And so if you're having infrequent bowel movements, that absolutely is going to irritate that bladder and make you urinate more often.
So that's kind of the same thing that you mentioned first with the obesity. It's a pressure situation.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, again, that's how the bladder senses things. It senses stretching or pressure. And so whether it's a bowel movement or a belly, either one of those are going to irritate the bladder.
Okay, so those things we know. Anything else that could cause that sensation of having to go all the time, and it wouldn't be an overactive bladder? Or are you drinking too much? What goes out of the realm of those possibilities?
So, right. Once you eliminate that it's not a fluid issue, once you eliminate that this isn't sort of a lifestyle, other non-urologic medical issue, that's where a urologist comes in. So at Pazona MD, we believe in a very holistic, thorough approach that involves a good history as well as a good evaluation. And so what we're going to do is make sure there aren't other warning signs of things going on. So what could those be? Well, we're going to check a urine sample and make sure there's not a UTI or blood cells in the urine. There's been times where we're telling a woman, oh my goodness, you're having all these issues because you have a raging UTI and you just need some antibiotics and all the UTI symptoms get better. So you'd be surprised how often that happens. We're also evaluating for whether or not your bladder is getting emptied. We do an ultrasound after you urinate to see how much is left behind. Definitely a much more common issue in men because the prostate, as per previous episode, causes an obstruction or blockage of the urine flow, and men don't always empty their bladder. And so you may go a lot, not because the bladder is overactive, it's because it never gets all the urine out. So if we think about, the bladder like a cup of fluid, so it fills up, and then we urinate and we expect it to empty all the way. But what if it fills up and you only get this much out? And then you drink a little bit and it comes back up and you got to go again. And you're living like this, where you're just constantly 3/4 to fully
never
full.
empty completely.
Exactly. So it doesn't take much fluid to give you that bladder sensation again of I've got to go to the bathroom. So, and again, we see that in women as well. And then lastly, in rare cases, I mean, something like a bladder stone or even bladder cancer can present with frequency, urgency, and wetting yourself. Now, I don't want everyone out there to go freaking out, oh my God, I peed too much, I have bladder cancer. So that's a very uncommon situation. So if your urinary issues are more situational and you don't urinate blood, it's very unlikely you have bladder cancer. But nonetheless, this is where you come to a trusted urology practice like Pazona MD, and we do that thorough evaluation and we guide you through and make sure that there isn't something bad going on.
Okay, well, this has been great. Great information. I think I learned a lot. And I think my problem may be that I'm drinking 2 huge glasses of water every night before I go to bed. Probably not the best plan and probably not an overactive bladder, probably my own fault.
Well, the only way to know how much of it's lifestyle versus an actual medical condition is to, number one, do some changes, right? You run some experiments at home. And if you cut out those couple cups of coffee in the morning, if you cut out the fluid 2 to 3 hours before bedtime and you're still having issues, come and see us. That's where we play a role. And I think as sort of a, wrapping a bow from my perspective, when should you come see a urologist for this? Well, when it bothers you. This is something, it doesn't pay to be a bladder stoic. I'm just going to tolerate this. I'm fine. No, I mean, there could be something serious going on. You could have undiagnosed diabetes. You may not be emptying your bladder. And more than that, there's no reason you have to live your life in a restroom. We have, we've talked about this before, right? Women especially, right? We've got guys who don't want to go to the doctor, and women will get everyone else to the doctor but themselves if it's a quality of life issue.
So true.
You guys will run to the doctor for your Botox and for the weight loss and for general checkups and preventative medicine. You ladies do great with all of that.
But we will soldier on and suffer in silence with everything else.
Absolutely. And there's no reason to. And we're going to get into our next episode, ways we treat this overactive bladder. And so realize you're not alone. I look at my job as a urologist is to be the guide for people and to, really help solve a lot of these quality of life issues that you don't have to suffer with.
That sounds good. Glad to know that.
Yep.
Well, thanks for all of this information. I think we should wrap up now with my favorite segment, Just the Tip. Okay, so from what we've learned today about an overactive bladder, number one, fluid in usually equals fluid out. We need to look at what and how much we are drinking each day. Number two, diabetes, obesity, sleep apnea, and constipation are 4 common conditions that, if left untreated, will make you TT a lot. And lastly, a urologist will be able to rule out a UTI, bladder cancer, and any other serious causes of an overactive bladder. Did I get it right?
I think you did.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I also got the shoes right. He doesn't know anything.
Well, we should probably wrap up this episode because I got to go take a leak. So,
or TT. Thank you so much.
On that note, please subscribe to the podcast and leave some comments. We have an upcoming episode on an Ask Me Anything, which should be very entertaining. So thank you for those who have sent messages to us. And otherwise, please subscribe on your favorite podcast channel or YouTube, or better yet, both. So until next time, Stream Team, please just show yourself a little bit more love and kindness. We are all works in progress, and that gives us opportunities to grow. Thanks, and have a great day.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Balls Deep. If you'd like to join our Stream team of listeners, please click the subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform. For more information about our practice, Pazona MD, please visit PazonaMD.com. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and the content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice. The show does not constitute the practice of medicine. No doctor-patient relationship is formed through this podcast or any of the social media channels related to this show. The use of this information is at the user's own risk. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice from any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions.